I think it's a fair assessment to say that it takes a lot to surprise me within the cinematic landscape in this day and age. I don't like to think of this from the viewpoint of being quote-unquote snotty or pretentious. Rather, while I can recognize that films are inherently great and worthwhile in their own right, it can be difficult for films made nowadays to genuinely and fundamentally shock me to my core. It's quite a true statement to say that much of the cinematic landscape is derivative, for lack of a better word. This isn't a bad thing inherently, as it's quite apparent that no matter the specific slant on the material, filmmakers everywhere are adept at translating their stories through such a powerful lens in the cinematic medium. Yet the inherent core of this idea, and the problem that I most certainly raise in the current film conversation, is how unique and truly fresh ideas are often suppressed under the mainstream studio system. It's within independent channels and niches then where true artistic freedom and expression is found. And the creative bounds that many of these filmmakers explore are unsurpassed in both scope and execution. And sometimes, when you walk into a film such as this and truly surrender yourself to its uncompromising artistic vision and freedom, you begin to broach a fundamental cinematic experience that truly gets to the heart of why cinema matters as an art form. Rather, you begin to feel this film on a deeper and more complex level than you could have possibly comprehended going into it. In short, these films shock you to your core, delivering a staggering artistic viewpoint and achieving artistry that feels wholly realized and cinematically complex. And when I say that Mona Fastvold's new film, The Testament of Anne Lee, is this exact type of film, I mean every single word of it. Let me set the scene for my personal viewing experience of this extraordinary new film. I attended the Heartland International Film Festival in Indianapolis, Indiana a few months ago to cover the festival for a few of my outlets as press. Amid a fantastic slate of independent shorts and feature films, there were select special presentations presented as part of the festival that included some film festival darlings and standouts from slates all across the globe. And one such film included in the slate was The Testament of Anne Lee. Now, I no doubt heard of the film and its status on the festival circuit thus far, and that much was apparent. As a huge fan of Mona Fastvold and Brady Corbett's work on last year's The Brutalist, I was very much looking forward to jumping into one of their lyrical and vibrant cinematic worlds yet again. Yet the issue in question here was that I didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into. That's right, I approached this film knowing absolutely nothing about it, and nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed. Early on a Saturday morning, I found myself walking into an Alamo Drafthouse location, settling into my seat with a few minutes to go until showtime, and truly preparing myself for what I was about to witness. I had no clue. Often, there's an unspoken agreement between audience members and the filmmakers behind these movies themselves, in which through their works of art, the filmmaker will ask the audience to surrender their viewpoints to their vision, and to truly lose themselves in the cinematic worlds on display. Often, this is easier said than done, and in my tenure as a film critic, there have only been a select few times where I've been able to achieve this with ease. Yet, it was apparent within the first few minutes of The Testament of Anne Lee, as a group of Shaker women moved silently through a forest of trees, convulsing and dancing in such grandiose and lyrical methods, that I knew I was about to experience something truly special. 2.5 hours later, I walked out of my movie theater in a sullen daze. I drove back to my hotel in absolute silence, contemplating everything I had just witnessed and really just mulling over what the heck that movie was. Amid the hustle and bustle of the rest of my schedule at that film festival the rest of that weekend, I could not get Anne Lee out of my head. And even in the months since seeing the film, as I've sat with the project and contemplated so much of its uncompromising artistic vision and scope, I've begun to appreciate more and more of what it accomplishes with ease. You know, it's not often that I throw this word around, and if you've been following my review work here for a while, which if you haven't, please consider subscribing at this point, you'll no doubt find this to be true. However, I find it necessary in this context to state that The Testament of Anne Lee is nothing short of a stone-cold masterpiece. And I mean every single word of that statement. It is rare to find a film within the modern cinema landscape this cinematic and wholly realized, uncompromising in artistic vision and execution in almost every single facet. And this is why I want to start off this review by stating that this film will be releasing in theaters wide on January 30th this year, courtesy of Searchlight Pictures. And this is quite literally required viewing for anyone interested in the cinematic art form and what it can broach across all genres and viewpoints. You see, The Testament of Anne Lee is a very rare film, of which very few are ever broached within the modern cinematic landscape, in which every single second and moment of its runtime is choreographed and perfected to an intense degree, with unflinching devotion and focus ensuring that the artistry on display remains as impactful and pure in scope as possible. The Testament of Anne Lee begins, as mentioned, with a sequence depicting the movement of cloaked women moving through a sea of trees, while narration by Thomas and Mackenzie dictates the story of a woman named Anne Lee. However, unlike other biopics detailing the story of a historic person through any other viewpoint, this film takes an entirely different approach. With unflinching resolve and dedication, the cloaked characters in the forest within the sequence begin to make jarring movements jerkish and almost unnatural, crying out in a feverish pitch as if in anguish, yet showing no signs of such overt pain. At first, such a scene seems distinctly out of place, almost unnerving in how intense and unrelenting the pain and torment is conveyed within these moments. Yet the purpose of such a sequence is made all the more apparent within the context of the story as the film progresses. You see, this film is a story about a woman named Anne Lee, played by Amanda Seyfried, who resides within a Manchester colony. One day, Anne stumbles upon an English sect founded by Jane Wardley and her husband, preacher James Wardley, that operates under the guise of the common Quaker faith at the time. Yet their way of practicing their faith takes an entirely different approach to what was traditionally portrayed within the Quaker way of life. You see, the Wardleys and their followers believe in the practice of cleansing from sin and praying to a higher power through intense chanting and dancing, shaking and convulsing their bodies in an unnatural fashion as a way to personify their grief, pain, and anguish to a higher power. And thus, the shaking Quakers, or Shakers, have been established within the context of this religious world within this time period. As Anne begins to become immersed within the Shaker lifestyle, she finds an outlet for the pain and trauma she has dealt with all of her life and begins to find a purpose she can call her own. As she becomes embroiled within the faith of the Wardleys, she begins to fall under the vision of how the second coming of Christ will occur in the form of a woman. Under a vision she has one day, she sees herself as the second coming of God, and therefore establishes an authority over the Shaker colony, depicting her establishment of a utopian society and the spread of the Shaker faith to America, all through the same manic song and dance that the Shaker movement was known for. And thus, the Testament of Anne Lee immediately transports viewers into the mania of this religious sect. In an incredibly immersive and captivating one-take sequence early on in the film, Fastvold moves the camera slowly around a crowded room of Shakers, who are singing, dancing, and convulsing as one singular body, with the camera picking up on every facial expression, detail, and movement in unflinching fashion. The song and chanting in the background picks up a monotonous and heavy tone, feeling almost hypnotic and trance-like in a sense, immersing the audiences from the start and never letting go. And thus, the film broaches a similar style of immersion into all of the musical elements throughout the story in such a realistic and wholly immersive way. As the story of Anne Lee and her movement transpires, and more detail is added to the story, we as audiences begin to place ourselves within the context of the story. As the movie continues along, we as audiences begin to feel every shouted utterance, every note of music, and as characters throw their hands up to the sky, calling in a higher power to save and deliver them, the most interesting thing about this film is how we as audiences begin to understand and feel this through the context of the story. To say I was utterly transfixed by the Testament of Anne Lee from start to finish is quite an understatement. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen in every single second of this runtime, as every single element here, from the music to the script, the pacing to the direction itself, feels so controlled and harnessed in every right, operating on such an efficient and high level and never allowing audiences to catch their breath in the process. This film genuinely feels nothing short of hypnotic, as if these core central dance sequences are therefore lulling audiences into an utter trance. You can't help but feel captivated by the central choreography on display, conveyed expertly through the movements and shouts of the cast as they float around the frame. And Fastvold, as a result, is granting audiences full and unabashed access into this world, seeping every single second into the frame and transporting viewers into an alternate realm entirely. Composer Daniel Blumberg, who previously worked with Fastvold and Corbett on last year's The Brutalist, returns to compose the music for this film, and the effect is otherworldly. Blumberg takes traditional Shaker hymns and melodies from history and expands upon them, fleshing out their melodies and intricacies, and allowing the performers themselves to capture the attention in these moments and never let go. Perhaps the greatest thing about the Testament of Anne Lee, and the element that makes it stand apart from most of the movie-going competition from the past year alone, is how it draws music into such a central and key role in the story and highlights its importance. To tell the story of Anne Lee and the Shakers without music would be quite literally impossible, as the core of her being and beliefs were ingrained into the song and dance that characterize the Shaker worship style. And the execution of the material here, as a result, elevates this beyond the standard structure of most biopics nowadays. You see, the Testament of Anne Lee is clearly a musical, but also not in the traditional sense. You see, unlike musical theater, which tells a story through vivid song and lyrics to move plot points ahead, Anne Lee is more of a narrative experience that conveys not only thematic structure, but also belief, faith, and the heart of the Shaker movement and history in such a visceral fashion. The history nut in me was going crazy with this film, and I expect so many other people will as well. There are so many vivid and unforgettable sequences in this movie, highlighted by Blumberg's composition and the choreography in such a prevalent and present way. And it genuinely almost becomes moving in a sense to watch this context and history through this entirely different viewpoint. The sequence where Seyfried's Anne Lee clutches up at the sky at the confines of a higher power while in prison, pleading pleading for enlightenment and hope in the most dire of circumstances, the extended sequences in which we view unflinching one-takes of the Shaker rites of worship through the viewpoint of external parties, where the somber reflection of their worship takes on a more sinister tone, and alas, even the final portion of the film itself, where one last unwavering hymn serves as a send-up and final cry of faith in a particularly poignant and emotional swoop. Everything about this film's execution, from the dialogue to the narrative to the cinematography to the music to the choreography, must be seen to be properly believed, and I mean every single word of that. And if we're going to talk about this film, we need to talk about Amanda Seyfried's performance as Anne Lee, carrying so much vulnerability and weight with every single action. Hear it right now, Seyfried in this movie is simply almost unbelievable. I cannot even fathom her performance in moments of this film, and it sounds like hyperbole, but I'm serious about every single word of that statement. In portraying a person such as Anne Lee, whose life was shadowed by innumerable tragedy and pain, Seyfried commands every single moment here, particularly within the musical scenes. Anne Lee as a character, as a result, leaps off the screen, becoming such a well-rounded character for audiences to identify and understand on a deeper and more complex level than ever before. Her performance here is bar none the best performance of the past year for me, and nothing comes close. The supporting cast is also full of an abundance of standouts who disappear into their roles with ease, including Christopher Abbott as Anne Lee's husband Abraham, who starts to view religion through the selfish confines of his own desires, Lewis Pullman as William, Anne's brother who wants to help her secure her perfect vision of a world, and even Tim Blake Nelson in an understated part as a neighboring pastor in America who seeks to learn more about Anne's teachings and lessons. Director Mona Fastvold is given clear rein to go all into her artistic vision here, and the result is nothing short of staggering. Serving as a window through which to view the historical context of the Shaker movement and the core principles that founded them, Fastvold devotes so much artistic flair and nuance behind the camera, with carefully controlled cinematography, stylized title cards portraying different moments and times in Anne's life, and an abundance of breathtaking choreography that is genuinely moving and transfixing. Suffice it to say, The Testament of Anne Lee swept me completely off my feet and never let me go until the credits rolled. I walked out of my screening of this film last October in a daze, literally unable in the moment to comprehend everything I had just seen. Mulling over it in the time since viewing it, my love for the film has only strengthened. In an era where so many films out there fall into formulaic trappings and never seem truly original in a literal sense, here arrives a shining example of cinema that feels so unique and individualistic from anything I can say I've even seen before in my lifetime. I have a feeling this film will be studied within film schools in the future, and it's such a distinct feeling at that. And when I say that when this goes wide in theaters on January 30th, you need to go check this out if you're interested in it, I mean every single word of that. Go see this movie. Granted, however, The Testament of Anne Lee will not be for everyone, and viewer discretion is advised. Ever since the film's premiere at the Venice Film Festival last year, there have been numerous stories of audiences supposedly walking out of the film, which is crazy to me because even if you find the plot boring, the film is so enthralling and captivating from a choreography and visual standpoint, I can't even imagine doing that. Audiences might not be able to get completely into Fastvold's vision of the film either, as it's not entirely afraid to get out there and avant-garde in portions either, and it does get quite graphic content-wise, so please discern that for yourselves. This is a borderline psychedelic, trippy, and hypnotic film in every sense of the word, and audiences expecting a straightforward history lesson in the traditional biopic structure are surely disappointed, or people who hate musicals too for that matter, don't go see this one. Nevertheless, however, to say you'll walk away from The Testament of Anne Lee a changed person is an understatement. This is a film that will fundamentally get under your skin in ways you can't expect. And even if you don't enjoy the overall journey, it's a film that you will never be able to forget, and that is what makes it so special. I have no hesitation in calling The Testament of Anne Lee my favorite film of 2025. As someone who was raised within the confines of music education and classical settings, I have never seen a film so aptly and deftly capture and describe the genuine power that music can have to change and shape lives. The song that The Testament of Anne Lee sings is a powerful one, and if audiences are willing to listen, they might walk away with something truly staggering. That's why I'm giving The Testament of Anne Lee a 5 out of 5 stars. The Testament of Anne Lee releases in theaters everywhere January 23rd.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.